Hello, 180 Drums podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's episode. My name is Mark Schroer, and on this week's podcast, we have the one and only Tristan Kelly. Tristan is an incredible drummer from Denver, Colorado. If you have Instagram or Facebook, make sure to look him up because he has over 1,000 killer drum videos of him just ripping. On the podcast today, Tristan is going to break some stereotypes you and I might have about being a drummer, about practice, and about owning gear. Anyways, sit back, enjoy the podcast, and please welcome Tristan Kelly and Jake Nicole.
Guys, welcome to the 180 Drums podcast. We have got Tristan Kelly with us today. This guy's just, dude, what's going on, man?
What's up, man?
First of all, so good to have you on the show. Love your vids, and you are quickly becoming Instagram famous. Man, what's it feel like? How's it feel?
Oh, man, it's funny. It's, I always tell people that out of everything I've done musically, it's so funny and almost ridiculous that the beat a day thing, like such an easy idea as that, is the thing that's kind of getting me some traction here in my career and stuff.
Well, it's so funny because you and I connected, it's probably 3 weeks ago now for the first time.
Yeah.
And we just chatted, man. We were just hanging out, just really wanted to get to know you after, kind of just crossing the streets, so to speak, on social media so much and waving at each other and then not having a convo. So I chatted with Tristan, guys, and I'm so excited to have him on the podcast today because getting to know him, I was really inspired by his story of how he kind of became a drummer and kind of the accident behind a bunch of it, right? Is that not the case?
Yeah, totally. I kind of feel like my path, in one way has been very intentional because when I got bit by the drumming bug, it was hardcore and I was all the way in. But on the other hand, just kind of like life in general for so many people, it's just all of these kind of unexpected and turn of events that really lead you to where you are. And I think so many of us have a plan for this is what our career is going to be like, and it very rarely pans out that way, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's true for me, man. I didn't think I would ever be launching an educational drum lesson website. It kind of all happens not by accident, but you just kind of move full force ahead and things come together in some weird way.
Yeah, totally.
Well, man, before we dive into your story, real quick, why don't you tell us about the current kit you're playing and the specs on that? Just so everybody out there who's like, what are you playing? The specs, we can just answer that right off the top and kind of remove some of the suspense, and we'll chat more and more about drums. But what is your current setup, man?
Yeah, man, I play a DW Collector Series kit. I got it in 1999.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I've had it for a long time, and it's, it sounds as good as the day I got it. It's a testament to DW, and in a weird way, kind of feel sorry for them, like a lot of high-end instruments. I mean, you can buy one, and it just will last you for your career. And so, I'm a pretty big gear guy, but in regards of just like, yeah, I check everything out, but I, partially financial, partially just I love what I have, but like I don't have a ton of stuff. I don't swap out.
That's probably a
stuff,
really good thing.
And,
yeah.
And like I just know my kit really well. I got it actually as kind of the classic DW pack with like a kick and 4 toms, so 10, 12, 14, 16 on the toms. So I generally play 12 and 16. But if I need to, I'm playing something a little more tonal, I'll swap out to the 10 and 14, tune them a little higher or something. Sometimes I'll do, 10, 12, 16 or something, but I feel like with those 4 toms, it's just such a wide range of options that I can get just about everything I need out of it. So yeah, that's my main setup is 22, 12, 16. I have a Pearl free-floating maple 6.5 by 14. That's kind of my go-to snare. To me, it's just the quintessential snare sound. Excuse me. It's I feel like there's certain pieces that when someone pictures a snare in their mind, they hear a snare in their mind. To me, this pearl, that's what it sounds like. I feel like if someone hears hi-hats in their mind, like lots of times they're going to be like new beats or master sounds or just some classic thing like that. So for me, the snare, I can tune it up, tune it down, and it does a ton of great stuff. For cymbals, I kind of have a weird hybrid as I like bigger cymbals like most people do these days. But I like small hats. I enjoy bigger hat stuff. That seems to be really hip these days too. But like, I just like the quickness. I grew up, one of my biggest influences as a kid was Stuart Copeland, and just fast, dynamic, articulate hi-hat work. And so that's something that, has been with me since an early age. So I'm playing 13-inch Zildjian KZ hats, so a dark K on the top, and then a Z custom.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, a Z custom on the bottom. And then, my main left-hand crash is a 19-inch dark K. My main ride is actually a vintage 24-inch A, Zildjian A ride. So it's super, super thin on the edges, but gets pretty meaty towards the middle and towards the bell. So it has a cool washy on the edges, but it can get pretty articulate inside. And that's the cymbal that just everywhere I go, everybody comments on.
Cool.
That's probably like on Instagram, that's probably the most commented and questioned piece of gear I have is.
Well, let me ask you, how did you come across that cymbal? Because you said it's a vintage A, right? So
yeah, it's from the research I've done. It's a 70s era A, and actually, oddly enough, it's my father-in-law's.
Oh, cool.
So my father-in-law, his name's Dave. He was a drummer and played, throughout high school and college and after college, and he just had his kit in the garage, and it's a big old leather, old school cymbal bag. And one day I was just going through the stuff, and had a lot of A's in the bag, and messing with them, but they were all kind of that old school, slightly clangy might be too harsh of a word, but just that kind of old school sound that wasn't sitting. I like that kind of modern K, super mellow, washy thing. But through this A on, it just immediately is just one of those pieces of gear that is just, the heavens opened up and like, wow, why is this just sitting in here?
Oh man, that is so cool. That's such a cool story, man.
Yeah, it's so random. Yeah. And so just, for years now, it's just been, a main part of my setup. Yeah.
Dude, so you're using you said the 19K crash, and it's a dark crash?
Yeah, dark thin. Yep.
Okay, dark thin. And then you've got this ride cymbal. Are you using other crashes as well?
And so then on the right-hand side, I use it mostly as a crash, but it's a 20-inch K custom light ride. So it's technically a ride, but it just makes an amazing crash. Just super mellow.
Yes.
It's a great crash to end a fill on and going into like a down section or something. It doesn't have like a ton of attack or anything. You just hit it and it's immediately kind of mellowed out and
nice.
Just a cool washy sound. So that's a pretty big cymbal setup, 19, 24, and 20. And then kind of pairing that with this weird combo of 13-inch hats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's really cool, man. It's cool to hear that the influences for that so far have also been Stuart Copeland. Let's just before we jump into influences too, because we could probably take this a few different ways.
Sure.
I'd like to still segue with the kit into what heads you're using. So you've got a DW. Is it Maple Collector's Maple?
Yeah, Maple Collectors. So right now, headwise, I'm like totally all over the map on tops.
Cool.
Yeah, tops I have Remo, bottom I have Evans, on my kick I have Aquarian. It's just like this weird.
Cool. Okay, well, dude, what have you been using for batter heads on your toms?
Yeah, so lately, the past 6 or 9 months, I've been using the Remo Ambassador X's coated.
Oh
So
wow.
it's like the traditional Ambassador, it's just a little bit thicker. So the reason why I went there is I was playing Evans EC2s for a really long time, and just was feeling like, kind of just for the heck of it, actually, was I want to go back to single ply and see what that's like. That's kind of how I've been with heads for a really long time. I've kind of still on this quest to figure out what is my preferred head, what is my sound.
Yeah.
And the Ambassador X's have been great. It's just a cool combination of kind of that single ply clarity and tone, but just that little bit of thickness kind of rounds off some of those overtones and just makes them last quite a bit longer.
Have you tried both coated and clear in that head?
I have not. I've generally been a coated guy. It's partly aesthetic, I just like that look, but also just kind of the traditional kind of more old school sound that it brings and stuff.
Yeah. You know what? Before I forget to, something that you said earlier that I thought was great, that is a takeaway for our listeners immediately, is that you said you've kind of had this one kit since 1999. So that's, what, 16, crazy. Coming up on 17 years?
Yeah.
But what I think is so cool about that right away for any specifically young drummers or even drummers that are a little bit older is to think about this. Don't spend all your time worrying about just buying drums, because that is such a black hole. And
for sure.
dude, I have been caught in that world so many times where had I spent a third of that time that I spent looking at drums, playing my drums.
Totally.
Oh, dude, eBay. If you've got the eBay app on your phone, guys, do yourself a favor and just get rid of it. If you've got Craigslist or in Canada, you got Kijiji apps, just remove it for a little while and play drums, because that is a bit of a scary world. So, yeah, that's cool, man. It's cool you've had one kit and you've zeroed in, and now you're kind of still, even after all that time, zeroing in on the sound, which, dude, everybody that we talk with, it's a little bit of a moving target. So that's really, really cool to hear, man. What are you using on the bottom of your heads?
So I'm using the Evans Rezo heads, the EC Rezos.
Cool. How do you find those?
Yeah, they're pretty cool. They seem to have a bit more of kind of maybe a mid-range punch to them than like if you're just going with your traditional single ply bottom head. I'm not going to sit here and try to BS my way and saying that, these bottom heads are revolutionizing my playing or anything.
Dude, there goes your Evans deal.
Yeah, like honestly, like I don't know.
No, that's cool.
Enough about
that is
what's going on. But
oh man, that is so hard to zero in on for sure. I mean, I think when it comes to, we've had lots of amazing drummers come into 180 drums and not even know specifically how to tune all that much. Like it's because you get to a point where you're focused on so many things. The last thing you're always thinking about is how to tune your drums. You get a drum tech, and there's other things that come into the picture. So for us ordinary guys, man, it's always a cool journey to find that sound and to shape it.
Sure. And tuning for me has always been a bit of an uphill battle, I guess. Partially because I can be a pretty darn particular guy. So,
cool.
So like I'll spend way too much time, like an hour on one tom of just like dialing and figuring out and kind of what you're saying with, just delete your eBay app. Like I feel like for me, like I just need to hide my tune bots and just tune it up and start playing and stuff. And
you know what? I laugh all the time. I have drummers come over to exchange ideas. I have students come over to my house, my home studio, or even a few different places that I play, and they'll hit the drums and it's like, oh man, these are out of tune. And I'm like, guys, I honestly, the time that I have down in my studio, I'm playing them. I don't even care. I end up putting in ears. I end up listening, and I'm not even listening to them, So And even when I'm playing in different settings, there's times where I find I'll tune them up as much as I can, and then I don't worry about it because so much of the sound of the drums is in the way you hit them. Like, we've had
Yeah,
so
for
many guys
sure.
come in and play our kit at the studio, and it'll sound so different from guy to guy. Same drums, same heads, relatively the same tuning, but it's personality, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it's this thing, yeah, I explain to my students a lot too of it's a moving target and it's sitting behind a kit. Hearing drums is so different than standing in front of a kit, and it's
Great point.
so different from hearing them recorded. I always equate it to when you're sitting behind the kit, um, it's kind of like hearing yourself talking, how you hear your own
Great
voice.
perspective.
But when you're out in front, it's kind of like when you hear yourself played back and you're like, oh, wow, that's how my voice really sounds
Yeah.
and stuff. It's so weird. But yeah, it's two totally different.
That's a really great point. If you can find someone, it's like, I'm sure you've experienced this. It's such a joy when you find someone who hits the drums similar to you,
Yeah,
and you can
totally.
step away and listen to your drums. It's
Yeah.
such a fun experience.
Yeah, definitely. When I play like whatever club shows with my band or something and I get the request
Hmm.
of, hey, can the opening band or the following band or whatever use your kit? I know a lot of drummers kind of squirm at that, but like I love that opportunity. I love to be able to be out front and hear my own kit and
Yes.
just be able to, make mental notes of maybe this needs to be adjusted or like I love Tom's tuned low, but oh, maybe that's too low. It's just so muddy and flappy out front or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And so
Yeah. Well, then the room plays a sound, the guy playing it, the
for
sound guy.
sure.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
variables, but it's such a cool experience to step back and hear that. So, okay, man, that's really great for your toms. Now, when it comes to your snare on your Pearl Free Floating, which, by the way, is a very, in my opinion, underrated drum and great drum for the value. I know that
For sure.
I had a piccolo version of that when I was much younger, and I regretted selling it forever because it's just it was such a great sounding drum, like a very I mean, I think a lot of these solid shell, stave shell drums that are being manufactured now are kind of modeled off this idea of limiting the amount of friction or reduction of sustain on the drum from the hardware, right?
Sure.
So, what are you using on that?
So I am using the new Remo P77, the Power Stroke
Yeah,
77.
that is such a trend, man. But I
Yeah,
think part of it is like you said earlier, the aesthetic, the visual of it.
sure.
I know that I'm already, we've had a couple into the studio, and I love the way they look.
Yeah, it's great. It's weird because it does look like it has a ton of muffling on it. But if you just crank it up to mid tuning or higher, like the drum will still sing. It'll still
Yes.
have a great ring to it. Lately, for the past 3-ish months, I've been using that. What they used to call the one lug or one drop. That the Massoff drums, Uso Massoff, that video that he did for Evans that kind of blew up a little while ago.
Absolutely.
That where yeah, you kind of tune the drum up as you normally would, and then you tune the top side of the drum higher, and then the bottom side of the drum, the side that's between your legs, you detune it, and that bottom 6 o'clock lug, you just detune it all the way until the head wrinkles.
Yes.
And so it's this really cool, weird combination of the drum is just dead, that kind of modern stadium rock sound, but it still has a decent amount of life to it because the whole top half of the drum is still tuned up high. So yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, just on Instagram, that's a very common question I get is like, how do you get your snare drum to sound like that?
Okay,
And
cool.
and so yeah, everybody, I just direct them to the YouTube video, and it's super easy. And I've tried it on quite a few drums now,
Yes.
and it just works on every drum. It's crazy. It's like I don't know. It's almost like a poor man's big fat snare drum or something. It's just
The irony, because Big Fat Snare Drum is totally already a poor man's thing that works so well. Shout out to Chris Mazzarisi, who we've had also on the podcast. He's a thinker. I love Chris. But you're definitely right. It's a great solution, man.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, you're right with, kind of talking about budget things like with the Pearl Free Floating. I think, even brand new, it's like a sub $400
Yes.
snare drum. And it is, yeah, it's a crazy value for the money. And And yeah, like you're saying, it's just a very clean, kind of pure sounding snare, just with no hardware interference. Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds great, man. And on the Rezo there, what head are you using, and are you using a specific snare wires?
yeah. So on the Rezo, I'm using the just the ambassador snare side. But a trick I picked up a while ago is I use what's called the collarless version. So it doesn't have, most drum heads, they come up from the hoop and they come up at a slight angle and then they plateau off. Um,
Right.
so this one, it just comes right off the hoop and it's like flat all the way across.
Remo's doing that now. That sounds
So
very similar to the Aquarian or Evans 360 model.
yeah, so this, I don't know how long it's been around. I feel like a while, but it's actually geared towards, more marketed towards marching snares, so that they can get just super super tight bottom head.
What's it called again?
So it's just the traditional ambassador snare side, but it's just called the collarless version.
Great.
So yeah, so it allows you to get that bottom head a little bit tighter, or even just as tight, but without quite as much, not being so scared that you're just going to totally decollar it and pop it off and stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely like a pretty tight bottom head just to get that snare sensitivity going. And my playing lends towards, ghost notes and that kind of stuff. So I like to be able to get that snare action going even at those low ghost note volumes.
That's great, man.
Yeah, and then for the snares, I use the Pure Sound, the split, where it's like a traditional 20 strand, or maybe it's only like a 16 strand, but there's a split down the middle, so it's like 8 on one side and 8 on the other side. And yeah, I just got it a while ago, a year or two ago, just to again try it out. It's supposed to help with sympathetic snare buzz and that kind of stuff. And yeah, it definitely seems to help. And before that, for a long time, I used I think it's a Rhythm Tech. It's like that pre-tensioned snare wire set that has like a plastic cover on the outside.
Yes,
yeah, it was pretty popular, I think, like in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was great too, like kind of being pre-tensioned. It allowed you to get the snares looser, but still get definition out of them.
Great. That's awesome, man. Yeah, something that I've liked that I actually installed. Maybe it's going to sound like blasphemy to a few people, but I have a couple Craviotto snares. Not to brag, found them on great deals, but one of the things that I did do on at least one of them, just one of them maybe, is I removed not the throw off, but the other side of the snare strainer, the butt plate. I removed it and installed one of these DW, I think they're called a mag butt plate.
Oh, yeah.
You know those? You familiar?
Yeah, yeah.
You're like, dude, why would you do that to Craviotto? That's horrible. But I did it because I like that you can switch between three. They've got it's essentially a switch, and you can throw between those tension points. I know that the trick throw-offs often feature that anyway, but yeah, it's a great little thing to use where you can kind of go between tension points. So that's something that I like as well for snares tension.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking on that, and with the idea of having the same kit for a long time, it's pretty cool nowadays, just the insane number of accessories that are out there, and you don't have to shell out a couple $1,000s for a whole new kit or $800 for a new snare to like completely change up your sound.
Yeah.
You can get these accessories. You can, that throw off is a great example. You can add a lot of versatility to your snare drum with that, or a big fast snare drum, or a drum wallet, or kick port, or whatever. Yeah, you can, for well under $100 or even under $50, you can just change your kit up, in a pretty easy way.
Man, it's so cool that we're talking about this because just the other day I saw Aaron Sterling. You familiar with Aaron Sterling?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He posted a picture, and it was like a couple cups, I want to say, like just some random house objects, and he said, "Here is the drum set that I used for John Mayer's Badge and Gun." And
oh, wow.
at this point, our listeners are probably getting getting quickly fed up of me talking about John Mayer, but I just love John Mayer, and I thought that was so cool because I've listened to that song a million times and never really paid attention to it. And I go back and listen to it, and sure enough, it's like he's using cups and bells and these little random things on a table,
Wow, crazy.
and that's how he created that. So I bring all of that up to say that the best thing you can do is take the kit you have and experiment with it and learn how to get the sounds you want out of one drum set, not thinking buying the newest snare or buying the newest whatever is going to get you that sound.
Totally.
A lot of the times we don't really exhaust. It's cool to just take one drum and almost exhaust ourselves with it sonically to the point where we know what it can do.
Yeah,
We
for
truly know
sure.
what it's capable of.
Yeah, it's great. And then when you get to a gig, you get to studio, whatever, and
Yes.
someone says, this is a little too ringy, or this is too this or that,
Yeah, you don't feel like you
how
got to
to
just
get.
pull out a new drum right away, right?
Yeah, and you just, sometimes you don't have that luxury. And so, yeah, you just know, oh, if I do this, I do that, I can at least get in that ballpark. And
Yeah, that's right. That's great, man. Well, that outlines the drums real well. Your bass drum, real quick. What are you using? You said Aquarian on the kick.
yeah, it's the Super Kick 1.
Okay.
So just clear single ply as that kind of
Yes.
built-in muffling ring. On the inside, I think it's made by Evans. It actually came with the DW kit. It's like a pre-made pillow. So it has like this kind of little flap that barely touches the front of the batter head, and then it gets skinny, and then it has another flap on the other side that barely touches
Right.
the reso head. So just enough dampening to get rid of some crazy overtones, but it leaves the drum open enough to, yeah, you can go various directions with it. And I've had that, this is probably blasphemous to a lot of people, but I've had that kick head on for 5 years,
Oh,
maybe
wow,
longer.
cool.
Like,
You know what? That's so funny, man. We just did a podcast with Ben Satterley that you haven't heard yet. It's unreleased as we record this, but what's really funny is he talks about this man like leaving drum heads on for a long time because if they still sound great, what's the rush, right?
yeah, like, I still love the sound of my kick, and I'm not the hardest hitting player. So yeah, like, it's perfectly fine. It's not dented. It's not anything. Yeah. Kick drum heads are expensive. So yeah,
They
if
are
it's,
very expensive.
yeah.
No kidding.
So yeah, if it's working, it's working, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's great. Okay, very, very cool. Now, when it comes to sticks, what do you use?
I use the Vic Firth AJ3 American Jazz 3. So the whole American Jazz line, I think, goes 1 through 6, is very similar to their standard series, but it just has a longer taper.
Okay.
So that longer taper is just a little bit faster of a rebound, and it's the size that I use is just under like a 5A size, so it's like
Okay.
a 85A type thing. So I have pretty small hands, so it just fits well in my hand, and that fast rebound seems to work well with a lot of stuff that I do. I play in that same series. The AJ6 is like pretty much the same size stick, but the taper is like super extreme, and it goes down to a tip that is like almost next to nothing.
Oh, wow.
And that is my go-to stick for when I get the comment the drums are too loud, and I feel like I'm already like holding back as much as I can.
Okay.
So it's just such a small. It's like a step away from going to like multi-rods or something.
Right,
So
right.
so it's cool because you still get the definition of a stick, but it's just such a light stick, and that taper is so extreme, and that the tip is so small that you're not gonna overplay any cymbal on it. You're not
Very
gonna.
cool. Can you read us that model again? Because that's something that
So
I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in.
yeah, for sure. It's the AJ6 American Jazz 6 by Vic Firth.
Cool. It's great. Yeah, because I know there's a lot of people who, are interested in being able to have an option where they don't have to switch over to hot rods.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, just kind of stumbled across the stick. And for me, it kind of goes back to, yeah, me growing up and stuff, but that was a very common comment of the drums are too loud. And one day it finally clicked that like actually blending in and playing to the room and playing, musically was getting me more compliments and more gigs than any fill that I've ever learned, so.
No kidding, man. That's a very great point. Why don't you unravel that a little bit, your experience playing in some of because those are great words of insight.
Yeah, for sure. So I played a lot as a kid in church. And so, it might be a little bit different now, kind of, the modern, at least modern American megachurch type setting has really brought kind of more rock and music to the church scene. But, me growing up, like drums were still very, at least in my church, was still kind of, yeah, we won them, but,
Okay,
so,
I got
so
you.
yeah. So just a lot of comments of they're too loud or, to this, I grew up in a church with, a choir and an organ and stuff. And as I got older, the church got more and more contemporary, but, choirs and organs and drums aren't necessarily, best buds in a lot of regards. So, as a kid, I totally didn't get it. I totally, at a lot of times had an attitude towards it of, well, I'm here to play and I'm going to do what I want to do. But, like most people, as you get older, you start to figure things out and, and just being aware and becoming more musical and realizing, yeah, when I got to gigs, wherever it was, the two things I got complimented the most on was being prepared and balancing to the room, balancing to the band.
Yeah.
So, and just like, yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, wow, that fill was really cool or whatever. But most people don't really notice, even people in the band, it's just, kind of, we're doing that stuff because it's fun and stuff. In some situations, yeah, it's definitely, called for if you're playing in a band, if you're playing in Chon, like, yeah, like you're going to be going for it and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But the average, whatever, singer-songwriter type gig, it's being prepared and balancing to the room. Like those are the two big things. Yeah,
absolutely, man. I totally agree. I think you're in a good place when you can. At least the phase that I went through is you begin to learn chops, and then you immediately are like, how can I fit this into any and every song that I'm playing?
Yeah.
And who's noticing? Is there another drummer in the room that looked at me when I do that? And it's funny that then you get a little older and more mature in your playing. You don't have to be older, but you spend more time thinking about that, and you get it just becomes tasteless, and you realize like, oh shoot, I'm messing up all these songs. I'm not thinking about the songs at all. All I'm hearing is drums the whole time. I'm just hearing linear patterns over everything we're doing. And then you get away from it, and then it becomes kind of, I think, the height of musicality is where you start to go like, man, how little can I play to complement the song? And I think sometimes that can also become an obsession too, where we start to become so supreme in our thinking that like any drum fill is no good. But there's a balance of like, you still want to play stuff everything's got to speak to the song musically, and sometimes that does mean you push the song a little farther over the edge and build up momentum, and a big fill is necessary, but it's rare. It's infrequent,
Yeah, totally. And yeah, like you're saying, it's whatever suits the music, and you can go to either extreme way too much of, I don't know, having Steve Jordan do his thing with animals as leaders. Like, is that going to,
right.
Or, vice versa? Or
I would
whatever,
love to see that, by
I
the
would
way.
too, actually.
As soon as you said it, I'm like, you're mentioning Steve. Where are you going with this? Yeah.
But,
You know what, though? And having said that, I would still err, for everyone listening, in case it's unclear, I would still err on the side of playing way less than even a little bit more than you should, because the way less is still a beautiful thing. And I actually think that playing as little as possible while saying a lot is the hardest thing to do, and it's kind of the height of mastering musicality, right?
yeah, for sure. And it's that same concept too of what your drum kit sounds like when you're sitting behind it versus being in front of it. It's the same thing, like what you're playing when you're sitting behind a kit versus when you're out in front of the kit can be two very different things. You can feel like something is really working, and you can feel like you're not playing that much. But when you listen back, you're like, wow, like, yeah, maybe the main beat is simple, but there's just this layer of whatever it is, ghost notes or diddles or whatever, that is just cluttering up everything that lots of times we kind of just do on autopilot or we don't even realize.
Yeah, that's great, man. It's so true. That's why I think monitoring your performances with, videotaping it is a really great thing. And if you can't do that, even just grabbing audio off a board mix is very eye-opening. Very eye-opening.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, you just don't know how eye-opening it is. For sure. Okay, man, this is awesome. So let's give us a quick rundown, because it's a fairly long story. And I'd say for time's sake right now, give us a brief rundown of your arrival at the drum set from an early age, because I think this is a great story.
So yeah, my start off with music was piano lessons as a young kid, early elementary school, just very classic Midwestern. I took piano lessons from the pastor's wife at the church kind of thing, and did it for a couple years, and it was fine, but I definitely didn't connect with it, and it was having to be forced to practice and this and that. And so, yeah, it's really weird to think about. But yeah, I came back to piano later on in life in high school and really loved it and really spent a lot of time working at it. So yeah, I did that. And then in middle school, coming into middle school band, first day of sixth grade, was all set to play the trombone in middle school band. And so got in, sat next to this kid named Nick, had never met him before, and just got talking, and he asked me what I was going to play, and I said trombone, and I asked what he was going to play, and he said drums because my dad plays drums. And it was just kind of this aha moment of like, wow, like drums is an option. Like I had never thought of it as a real option in, school band or anything. My little bit of experience with drums was, like I said before, in church, and they were kind of pushed to the back of the stage, and they were kind of,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, so I was just like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I think drums would be awesome, like way better than trombone. And so, very kind of classic public school system. To decide who would play what instrument, there was a standardized test, and it was very old school, like an actual record on a record player was played, and this lady would just talk about music and rhythms were played, and you had to fill out this kind of standardized test sheet. And since I had piano lessons, like I just knew everything. I knew how to count music. I knew general, musical terms. And so the test basically said I could do whatever I wanted to do. And so I picked drums. And so that poor kid, Nick, the test said that he had to be a saxophone player, I think it was. So, so he didn't get to play drums. He was on saxophone. Yeah. So like just that encounter is, what started it. And like, we could very easily be on a trombone podcast right now talking about trombone a day instead of beat a day. Like that's like,
I don't know, man. Is that a thing? Is that a thing? I think what the first thing I said to you is, man, it sounds like there was almost another Tristan Kelly. Maybe Nick would have taken over that. But
totally.
Man, so cool to hear how you've arrived here, and I love that story. I think that's really encouraging for us to hear that. It's like you don't plan everything, right? You planned in going in to learn something else, and you came out inspired by a totally different option, but you were open to it, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting. Like, there's just so many things like that have led me to, where we are today. Yeah. And, just even getting into drums in middle school band, like I have a soft spot in my heart to this day for like elementary and middle school band programs. Like, yeah, I feel like the middle school band teacher is definitely an unsung hero of the music industry.
Yeah.
To have, a person that is coming in every day and, to a certain extent, suffering through like beginning band charts and getting kids used to playing anything and corralling them all together. And my son is actually in middle school band right now, and so I'm kind of reliving a lot of those things. And yeah, it's very underrated. Like public school music education, is definitely where I got my chops, I guess, as a musician.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, man, it's great. I love one of the other things I love is just how transparent you are with what you're doing and what you're working on, and that like it's not that it's a fluke at all because it's very hard work to put up a beat a day. It's insane that you do it every single day. But like what are the struggles? Let us in a little bit on what life looks like for you now as a drummer, what you're working towards, what you're hoping to achieve, and how you kind of started Beat a Day and what it looked like from day one.
Yeah, so kind of where I am now as a drummer, and I guess more importantly, more as a whole, like where I am now as a person and what I'm doing is I'm married. I've been married for almost 14 years to an amazing woman, Stephanie, and I have 3 kids, Gavin, Guinevere, and Gemma, ages 12, 10, and 8. So that is the frame of my life of where like I'm approaching drumming and music these days. It's doing the Beat a Day and getting all that stuff rolling is definitely a huge part of my life. But like I feel like, as a lot of kind of working musicians or even musicians who have day jobs and have families, like it's always a balance maintaining everything. And as like Beat a Day is growing, like definitely figuring that out as I go, and just how much time do you put into a project and how much time can you put into a project. And for me, going through Beat a Day, I really realized that, it's time and a commitment, but it's definitely not as much as I would have thought.
Right.
To go from a guy who just had a random Instagram account with like 100 and some followers that were friends and family to, go to, 30 plus thousand followers. And it's pretty amazing how I didn't have to like give up every other aspect of my life to be able to do that. I guess the one caveat to that is that, I had 20 years of drumming and practice and shedding before I started Beat a Day, so that's the big caveat, I guess.
Well, that's great, man. Take us to day one. What did day one look like, Beat a Day, and where was it born out of?
So day one was born out of the idea that I am way, 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 way too much of a perfectionist, and that I use that as a very easy excuse to not create things, or I guess more specifically to not finish things.
Yes.
For me, it's a very, the scariest part of creating things is labeling it as done. As long as it's labeled in process, it feels like it's not, this isn't really open to criticism. This isn't really open to like, I'm still working on it. But the second that you make a video, you make a drum cover, you make a song, whatever, and you label it as finished and you put it out there for public consumption, like then it's open to critique, criticism, whatever. And for me, that was a very big hang up. Like, no, let me just work on this for 12 more weeks and it'll be perfect. It'll be ready to go. So Beat a Day started from that mindset of like, I just need to come up with an idea and just post it every day. I need to do it relatively fast. Like I can't spend a week working on one 15-second Instagram beat. So I need to, yeah, kind of do it fast, post it, get over some of these hangups. And yeah, it's been crazy. Like I've learned more about myself, in kind of those regards through Beat a Day than I have musically through Beat a Day. So yeah, it's the process is it's a little bit different now. When I first started, I would sit down for usually about an hour and just play. And when an idea came, when something struck me, I would kind of stop and take a few minutes and like really focus on that idea and hone it down and then play it through, a handful of times. So that way I could get a 15-second clip of it that, made sense and was kind of a logical thought to follow. Like the big thing that I wanted from Beat a Day from day one was like, I want this to be a very cohesive idea that someone could see and take away. Like I wanted it to spark ideas in other people. It was like, oh, that's like such a simple idea, but I never thought of it that way. Or, oh, that's really cool the way that's placed. And just to take it and kind of inspire them in their own practice routine. So yeah, early on, I would just sit down for an hour and play, and kind of I found that like around an hour was like kind of my peak level of mental capacity.
Yep.
And trying to sit down and very intentionally like come up with ideas. Like I feel like, most of us could sit down and just play for a couple hours and it wouldn't be a big deal. But when you're sitting down and actually like trying to be mentally engaged to find a new idea, like at least for me, yeah, I found an hour was around the cap of. After that, I just kind of am mentally checking out and
yeah, absolutely, man. That's been truly the case in my own practice. There's been times where if I'm on enough of a specific mission or goal, I can sit and practice for a few hours. But typically, it's almost a time restriction as well now, where I don't have more than an hour to invest in practice. And when I do, try and make it as structured as possible. And I mean, I use even 180 drums. It's a resource that I use because I'm asking info from guys that I'm interested in.
Sure.
And that's part of why I know for, not that this is trying to be a big sales pitch for 180 right now, but part of the reason we've structured the lessons to be this like 10-minute learning, 10-minute practice is exactly that. It's just time, man. Time is such a resource,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, there's been so many times where I've gone on YouTube and watching some video and, oh, this looks like a cool thing I want to learn. And then the video loads up and it's like 22 minutes long. Like, oh, I don't have time for it.
Well, man, something that I love that Benny Greb shared. I went and saw Benny Greb at a clinic, and something that he shared that I thought was great is he said, a lot of times we believe that because we own something, whether it is physical or digital, that it makes us smarter when it actually doesn't do anything for us until we apply it. And something that I've seen a lot of guys do is make these big, massive playlists on YouTube of like things I'm going to learn. Or just like hoarding all this information, but spending more time gathering info than learning or executing on ideas. And that's another trap. It's similar to buying new drums all the time or looking for new drums, right? You're never really investing in that thing. You're just acquiring more stuff, hoping it makes you better, hoping it makes you sound better, play better,
Yeah, totally. And that's actually a thing with Beat a Day too that I've seen in myself, and I'm still in the process of trying to figure out how to correct this, is that, I've done 570 some of these things now, and my drumming vocabulary isn't necessarily 570 items larger. Like there's so much stuff that like I've come up with and I've played or whatever that, I've totally forgotten about or it hasn't made it into, my go-to stuff. And, I feel like, we can't, there's a certain limit to what, we can kind of have in our arsenal before our brains explode. But
totally.
But yeah, it's the same thing. Like, just learning tons and tons of stuff and doing tons and tons of whatever independence exercise or this or that. It's like, it's all kind of building to the greater, musician that you are. But yeah, there's definitely it's a point where you have to kind of focus and figure out what you want to become and how you're going to get there. And yeah, and like you're saying, yeah, these big, list of stuff isn't going to do it. Yeah, we actually have to make kind of a path and execute how we're going to get there. And
well, man, listen, I'm so interested. You talk about having a path and execution. I mean, how do you lay out filming the lessons? Is it something where you shoot a bunch of them all in one day? Do you shoot it every single day? How do you shoot it? Like, run us through a bit of this, the experience for you every day, your routine.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the average routine now is I still sit down and do a big chunk, usually about an hour. Kind of the big break between beat a day was at the 1 year mark. For the first year, it was just me sitting down with an idea and playing it, and then I was kind of leaving it up to the viewers to dissect it or take away what they could from it. When I hit the 1 year mark, I was really feeling like this really needs to change. Just personally for me, just kind of after a year of posting a beat every single day, it just gets a little stale. And so I was like, well, I'll start including notation. Like my thought being, oh, that'll be so easy. Like it's me playing. It's not like I'm having to sit down and transcribe, someone else and guess what they're doing and this and that. It's like, it's just me. It'll be so easy. Which, it's definitely easier, but yeah, definitely wrong. Yeah. It's amazing. Like how much I play that is just autopilot. It's just muscle memory. And to be able to figure that out has been really eye-opening to me, like kind of reevaluating where I am as a drummer and what I'm actually doing. So now it used to be I could sit down and maybe in an hour session, I could get 6, maybe a week's worth of beats out of 1 hour session.
Got you.
So now I'm figuring out what I'm doing. I'm taking the time to slow it down so that way it has both the full speed groove and then at the end of the video, a short snippet of a slowed down version. And so just even that in itself has been really eye-opening it's amazing how I can play a groove at whatever 130 and then slowing it down to 60 just feels impossible sometimes just because you want to start adding in, kind of add in a few ghost notes here or there to kind of help keep the time or the feel or whatever. And so, or just, even technique wise of, this fast double on my foot is so easy at a faster tempo because my foot's just kind of spasming anyways, and jabbing it in there, and stuff. And so being able to do that at a slower tempo and have actual control over things. So for me, that's been probably my biggest new practice thing is coming up with these ideas, playing them, and then slowing them down and really dissecting them slow, and trying to make them feel halfway decent slow. Like that's hard to, and it's not always going to be able to happen, but when something's really at a faster tempo and it just kind of has that groove and that gallop and that cadence to it, and then when you break it down slow and it just feels like a stiff explanation of every stroke, and like, is there a way for me to still have that same feel at any tempo? And so that's been fun, trying to figure that out. And
you're right. That's such an important thing to do, is to take things that you already know and make sure that you can play them slow. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, Tristan, how many every one of our instructors, I'll just put it that way, with the exception of very few, have come in, and anything that they play, a lot of it's autopilot, and I'm helping them dissect, the things that they're truly breaking down and trying to teach. And then as we get into it, I mean, you've been on the site, you've seen this, I'm sure, is that it's always harder slow. It's always like guys will joke, we'll laugh on camera, we keep it really real and organic, and guys will always be like, oh man, dude, it's so hard, man. So you're right. If you can own stuff slow and make it feel real good, it's just going to be that much better when you speed it up. And there's a lot of songs that require stuff to just groove slow, and you got to make it feel good. It's got to groove, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome, man. What was your first paid gig?
Oh man, my first paid gig. When I couldn't tell you exactly what the first was, but when I was in high school, early high school, I got really, really, really into jazz. And there was this scene at my high school that was really into jazz. So I played with a buddy of mine, Sam. He was for being a high school student, was a killer jazz guitar player, and a couple other buddies. And we started playing like at all these coffee houses just as like a jazz quartet usually. And then it kind of started branching out into like corporate and wedding gigs. You know, it was just crazy being, you know, just whatever, a sophomore, junior in high school, and being in this, you know, what is traditionally would be viewed as, you know, like an older guy gig, you know, playing in a jazz quartet at a wedding reception or something, and stuff. And we played once at the opening of a Circuit City, and it's like a electronics chain store that is now out of business, I think. But we played there, and it was, I think we got paid $2,000. So it was like $500 each for like high school kids. And we were just all blown away. Like we thought we were like the coolest dudes ever, you know, making all this money. And I remember the bass player immediately left and went to the record store and just spent all of it.
Oh, man.
Spent all of it on albums, just all of that. That was just like the kind of kids that we were, kind of these band kids, you know, and just, yeah. And so yeah, doing that. And I mean, between playing jazz in high school and doing like church type stuff, like I feel like I really got this concept of balance and listening and all this kind of stuff really beat into my head. Yeah. And so that's, yeah, I'm definitely a big proponent of pushing that, especially early on, you know, with private students or whatever, of, you know, it's great that we're learning your favorite tune, you know, and stuff, but how can we take this to the next step to actually, you know, feel what you're doing and listening to what you're doing, listening to what other people are doing. And yeah, it's just, it's so easy to get caught up when you're playing with other people and just focusing on what you're doing and your awesome fills and stuff. And yeah, what we've already talked about, just taking a step back and just feeling what the tune needs and seeing what other people are doing. And
yeah, that's great, man. So true, dude. That's awesome. I'm going to switch gears and ask you a couple rapid fire questions. So,
all right.
And your answers, again, they don't have to be rapid, but who do you view as successful?
Oh man. I feel like
Let me just say music related or non-music related.
Sure. I feel like anyone who is doing what they want to be doing, you know, we live in a very cool day and age where it seems like more people than ever are making a living or a partial living or whatever, you know, doing the creative things that they love, whether it's, you know, making handmade stuff or making music or writing or whatever. So it's very cool. You know, I've used to be, even very recently and still to a certain extent, like pretty hung up on the idea of like, I'll be successful when, or I'll be a official professional drummer when I can make 100% of my living by playing drums.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
And do you want to fill the listeners in on what else you do to provide income right now?
Yeah, so back in the early 2000s, I just kind of fell into programming and graphic design. I've kind of always been like just into computers and that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I've done computer programming and graphic design and kind of like the web side of things for, since the early 2000s. So yeah, I've had a couple day jobs doing that, and about 6 years ago, I got laid off, and so just through talking with my wife, like, yeah, let's take the gamble and let's try the self-employed thing, and so would do, you know, programming from home as just freelance work, and started teaching drums more and having more time to play and do gigs, and it's definitely being self-employed has freed me up family wise to, if I need to, do an evening rehearsal, evening gig, like my schedule isn't so packed that my family never gets to see me.
Yeah.
Like that's a tough schedule to overcome, when you're working all day and then you're home for an hour and then you got to go off to practice or a gig or whatever and stuff. And it definitely be done, but yeah, it's hard on everybody, and you're kind of, really burning the candle at both ends. And at some point, like, things are going to tire out and stuff. And so, yeah, I feel very lucky to be able to work from home. And so, yeah, like our kids' school is 2 blocks away. And if they have anything during the day at school, I can just walk or drive down. And
that's awesome, man.
And yeah, so I'm kind of doing both right now and trying to figure out, like, how do I keep taking one step at a time to get to where I want to be as a drummer and to be able to support my family doing what I love and all that kind of stuff. And I used to be very much in the mindset of this one thing is going to happen and then it's going to just all break open, kind of that younger mentality of whatever.
Silver bullet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, kind of as we all learn, as we go through life, and we're talking about all these weird twists and turns that take us where we are, it's just one day at a time and building and just trying to figure out the path and make smart decisions and work hard and just have a game plan. And that's something that I haven't always been great at. I'm very much, I just like doing a little bit of everything, I guess. So sometimes I have a hard time focusing on a specific game plan. Like, if you were to ask me the question of, like, what kind of drummer do you want to be, or what do you want to do drum wise to make a living? Do you want to be a studio guy, a touring guy, a educator? Or if I'd say, I don't know, I want to do it all. Like, I want to, know, and so that's been really cool, but it also, like, has, taken me on some weird twists and turns, and, like, doing programming and graphic design and just kind of, I find something and I want to learn it and do it. And so, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. My dog.
That's okay, man. That's awesome. That sounds like a little dog. I can tell.
Yeah, fierce little dog.
Dude, it's always little dog syndrome. Always. Little dogs think they're the toughest, man. Oh, man. That's awesome, dude. Okay, cool. That's great. If you could send a postcard to everybody on the planet, and this is a question I like to ask because it's part of our message, is sometimes we, in the spirit of saying less, saying more with less, this is a great question, is if you could send a postcard to everybody on the planet that they would read in their own language, it'd be translated, what would be your message in either a sentence or a few words?
Oh, wow. That's a crazy question. Man.
Just gonna get delivered to everybody, Tristan.
Yeah,
no pressure.
Man. It would be, let's see. I think it would be along the veins of, like, almost a cheesy answer of be yourself, or maybe kind of figure out what could you do to step away from the herd a little bit.
Cool. Okay.
I feel like, sorry, man. Do you want me to grab my dog? She is like,
sure.
Is it like super horrible? Sorry, man.
All right. And while Tristan's grabbing his dog, something that I'll talk about just right away, the points that I've been taking away from this podcast so far is that, I love that Tristan shared how when it comes to getting over our insufficiencies as drummers. So, right away I hear him talk about, man, it was hard for me to release something every day and not feel like it's perfect, but putting out a product that essentially as soon as you post it, it's considered, quote, finished. But that doesn't mean that it's got to be perfect, and because he's growing and developing as a drummer, it's an ongoing target. But he's become comfortable with feeling slightly uncomfortable about putting something out that isn't perfect in his own eyes, and allowing himself to receive some criticism. And I think what's cool is when you start to do that, people really admire the transparency. And we live in an age of transparency where things are becoming more and more transparent. So, Tristan, man, I just thought it was so cool that you shared that, just about being vulnerable and taking chances and truly putting up stuff that, you might not always be perfectly proud of, but in the spirit of moving forward, you're just posting.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So I think we left off, and the last thing you were saying is that if you could leave a message for everybody, it'd probably be to separate yourself from the herd.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's kind of part of the success of Beat a Day in a certain regard. I started Beat a Day with the idea of, or I guess I started before Beat a Day with, just drum covers, and was honestly doing drum covers because everybody else was doing them.
Right.
And like, I was super late to the drum cover game anyways. Kind of the peak had probably already happened, and it just wasn't resonating with me, and I was just doing it because it's what you're supposed to do as a drummer in this day and age. And I was just kind of tired of it, and figured I need something. I need to post content, but it just needs to be a little bit different. And I think what I mean by stepping away from the herd, I'm not saying running away from the herd. That could be cool. That could be cool too if you could figure something out. But just taking a step or two away from what everyone is doing. With the start of Beat a Day, drum videos was not a new idea by any means. Drum lessons was not a new idea. Drum lessons online was not a new idea. But just the idea of I'm going to post something every day, that seemed to be new. Like, I did quite a bit of searching on Instagram and Google and wherever to try to find, like, has anybody tackled like a project of posting something every day for a very long time.
Right. And something that's not in the drum world, right? Because we know video blogging is like when it comes to sharing personal things, there's some people that have definitely taken on this approach, and it's worked wonderfully.
Yeah, for sure. I found some guys that had there was a guy that had written a song every day.
Great.
And yeah, it's crazy. And makes what I'm doing seem super easy when I think about that. But yeah, I hadn't really seen anyone, especially on Instagram, that had done anything like that. So it's kind of like it's a pretty easy idea. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it just feels different enough to feel like I would like doing it, and it would attract people and stuff. So yeah, that would be my big advice is step away from the herd and kind of let who you are as a person be able to shine through that.
That's great, man. Do you have a favorite book, a go-to book?
A go-to book? Let's see. I don't know if it's a go-to book, but actually I just reread the book Rework. It's a guy named Jason Fried, I think. I don't know if you know the company 37 Signals. They're like a web company. They create a lot of apps, and they have a pretty popular app.
Oh, that's great.
Called Basecamp.
That was going to be my next question. Is this an app that you use a lot?
So yeah, it's just a book that this guy that co-founded this company wrote. Super easy read, and it's called Rework. Just kind of going through the idea of here's all the things that everybody says or most business books say you need to do, and here's the order that you need to do them in. And this guy Jason started this company 37 Signals, and they just kind of started it, kind of like I did with Beat a Day or anybody's doing, trying to get something rolling online. 180 drums, anything like that. And yeah, you read and you prep and you do all the stuff you can, but in all reality, you're just kind of starting it and doing it.
That's exactly right.
And you're learning as you're going, and things that are supposed to work the way the book says don't work, and things that you never expected would work are like the things that are blowing up. And so, yeah, it's just an interesting read of how their company started and grew, and just how things worked for them. And
what does their company do?
What's that?
What does their company do specifically?
The big thing they're known for is they developed a online platform called Basecamp, and it's a software that you use for like team development. So it's like kind of like a project management where people can get on and post what they're working on and how the project's going and collaborate and that kind of stuff.
Cool. Is that something that you were using prior to reading the book?
No, I don't believe I was. They have a couple other things, but just kind of, where I've been in the tech world, just was, a book that was being read by a lot of people. And so, it's been out for a few years now. And actually, I just reread it. It is such an easy read that it's kind of one of those ones that you can pick up and just kind of refresh with really quick. Cool. And it's just super inspiring, just any story of, I just love that story of just random dudes who started a thing and then it got really huge. And
what principles did they say helped them get to success? Like, what was your biggest takeaway that you could begin applying right away?
The biggest takeaway for me is kind of like a saying of, don't be so worried about falling into the trap of this is the right way to do things. And that was going back to my, perfectionist tendencies of, we can use that as an excuse to not get started. Before I started Beat a Day, or even before I started drum covers, like one of the big hangups for me was like recording gear and cameras and this and that. And I actually had a spreadsheet that had like a total of, I think it was like $16,000 worth of gear. This is what I need to get started doing drum covers. Like, before I can play, I think my first drum cover was Royals by Lord. Like, before I can record this drum cover, I need this $16,000.
Wow, and what did you end up settling on?
Here, like, I have, like, right now, like, maybe at the most $500 worth of recording equipment. Like, all just bought off eBay and Craigslist and stuff. And
so that would be microphones and a camera?
Yeah, for the first while, I just used my phone as my camera and stuff. And my wife got my wife a DSLR for Christmas a few years back, and so I started using that too and stuff. But it's just it's funny just how much you can do with so little. And when you have little, it really forces you to be creative and to come up with cool creative stuff. And, like when I wanted to do a bass drum cam for videos, I was trying to figure that out. And like, what can I do? And maybe I should go out and buy one of those like little tiny tripods for $40. It's kind of like, flexible ones or this or that. And like, I ended up just getting a brick that was like part of like landscaping brick, and going to the dollar store and buying an iPhone case and taping it to the brick.
Amazing.
And then just setting it on the floor and putting my phone in there and hitting record. And I still use it to this day. It's just like,
oh, we need a picture of that for the show notes. That is too cool.
And
it's awesome.
Just kind of getting over the hang up of like, this is the right way to do things. It's just start doing things and figuring it out as you go. And that's, would be in kind of this vein. My biggest advice would be just start. Whatever your idea is, just start doing it and figure it out as you go. And that's most of the fun, actually, is just kind of learning as you go. And
Yeah, man, that's great advice, and I would totally agree. I mean, so much of what we've done with 180 Drums has been exactly that. We're just taking chances and doing stuff that we find is useful for us, and hoping that it connects with people and it resonates. And at the end of the day, you can plan, you can prepare, and you can brainstorm, and then it's like Mike Tyson's boxing coach used to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And
Nice.
and that's exactly it, man. It's like you can get this great game plan and then you go out and no one buys your product, or a bunch of people buy it and your website crashes, and suddenly you're like, well, we have to rethink. Either way, you have to rethink what you were originally planning on doing. And it's all problems have potential solutions, right?
Yeah,
Which is the
totally.
fun thing. So man, that's awesome. If you could go back and give yourself advice 5 years ago, I feel like I have an idea what it would be, but what would you say to yourself? Or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely be in the vein of like just get started and
Yeah,
get over some of this stuff. Kind
that's
of all
great.
tied up in all this for me is definitely this weird, almost still adolescent fear of what are people going to think of me, or what are people going to think of what I'm doing, and stuff. And, kind of as we all get older, to a certain extent, that starts to fade away a little bit. And as we get, just more mature and more comfortable in our own shoes, and stuff, it definitely starts to change. But, yeah, it is scary. It's scary to be a creative person and putting yourself out there. And I feel very lucky that I've found traction on Instagram, because I feel like Instagram is a very chill and nurturing group of people. I feel like, someone like, I don't know, Cobus or Casey Cooper, who came up on YouTube. That's kind of a harsher place to.
Oh, no kidding. I would
Yeah.
agree.
So yeah, I feel like it's scarier than a lot of non-creative people, or certain people don't realize, at least for me, of like, hey, I'm doing this thing, I'm putting this out there, and I hope you like it. And
Oh man, so true, so true. What's really cool is I was just at a conference last weekend, and one of the things, I think it was Seth Godin. Seth Godin was speaking. For all you marketing guys, Seth Godin. He's
yeah,
amazing, amazing. And if you're a drummer listening and you don't know who Seth Godin is, go search up Seth Godin, listen to some of his talks, buy his books. I mean, I really believe in investing in your education, because I think it makes you care that much. So I'd say go and buy one of Seth Godin's books. But something that he shared is, I believe it was him, is he said it's not art unless it could go wrong. So it's like the
huh,
whole point of art is that it could go well or it could go terribly wrong, and anything that you can apply those rules to becomes art. So business is art, right? Being a drummer is art, because when you put up one of those videos, it has the potential to fail, right? It has the potential to
right,
be a failure. From your own perspective is the only one that matters, but if you're being criticized and judged by everybody for a video, or you lose a bunch of followers, then that video kind of failed you, and that's what makes it art. And that's what's so beautiful about it, is that it makes us vulnerable.
yeah, totally, yeah. Um, it is. It's basically you're having an opinion, and I feel like kind of in this modern culture, especially in politics, is like everybody's scared to have an opinion.
Hmm.
You're trying to reach just broadest base that you can, and and not want to offend someone or something. But yeah, it's the second you release something artistic or make a statement, like, that's who you are, that's your opinion, and not everybody's going to dig it. And
Yeah.
yeah, that can be a thing that can take some work to get over, to realize that not everybody's going to dig what I do, but there's going to be people that do dig what I do, and it'll be great. Yeah.
Hmm. Dude, that's awesome, man. Well, listen, we have been keeping you for well over the hour that I was expecting, so let me just start by saying, on behalf of the 180 family, dude, how much we appreciate your time and your investment in the community. You're awesome, man. You're so talented, so gifted. I love getting to be inspired, and I love that you're offering something to the world that is inspiring other guys to learn stuff. You've made it educational. You've made it a lot of fun and interactive, and I love that you're so accessible, that you have zero ego, which is cool because some guys can begin to form an ego really quickly, and there's just no room for that. I mean, it's such a silly thing, but you've done such a great job at humbling yourself and enjoying the journey, man. So, dude, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on the show. Is there anything else that you would want to add before we shut it down for today?
Oh man, well, yeah. First off, thanks, man. That means a ton to me. That's probably some of my favorite comments to get online, or wow, that inspired me to go practice that. Inspired me to learn it, or
that's great.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like the most encouraging thing for me. Yeah, for me, parting thoughts would be just in the same vein of, don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I know it's easier said than done, and it can take some work, but yeah, it's totally worth it. You'll learn so much more about yourself than anything else. Most anything else could teach you, of just being creative and taking those chances, and just it'll grow you faster as a person and a musician than I think you could imagine.
Man, that's awesome. Tristan, thank you so much. We look forward to having you back on the show. You're the man, dude. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
There you go, everyone. Tristan Kelly. Such a good guest to have on the podcast. Super knowledgeable. But not only that, such a humble guy. It was so good to have him on. Make sure to go follow him on Instagram and Facebook. You'll find thousands of incredible drum videos. He's insane. If you want some more info on Tristan, head over and check out the show notes at 180drums.com/Tristan K. If you enjoyed the podcast today, please go rate us. Tell your friends, tell your family. Go tell that girl at the coffee shop if you really want. Anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.